Good afternoon, everyone. It is the lunch hour. We are very excited to have our panelists for today. I couldn't think of the word. My name is Panayota. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the training and education advocate here at Turning Point of Lehigh Valley. And I will introduce our panelists in a second. But just as a quick introduction for those of you that are joining us, I'm going to put a brief poll up to ask where you're coming from. So let us know what county you're joining us from. If you're from Lehigh County, Northampton County, if you're from another county within PA, or maybe even outside of the state. Sometimes it happens. But yeah, let us know. I'll give you a minute or so for that. In the meantime, just as a quick reminder, this webinar will be offered on demand on YouTube within a day or two. If you do have any additional questions, you can always reach out to our Turning Point helpline, 610-437-3369. I'll put that in the chat as well. And there will be a feedback survey, or there should be a feedback survey that pops up at the end of the webinar. All right, so we'll go ahead and see. Looks like the majority of us are from Lehigh County, so welcome, thank you. And somebody from outside of PA, so thank you for joining us from outside of the state. That's exciting. So just as a quick reminder, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We do ask that we do not share personal identifying information just for the safety and security of others. But if you do have any individualized questions, please feel free to call our helpline at any point or contact any of our great speakers. And yeah, if anyone does happen to share anything, again, we'll do our best to answer within the chat as long as it's kind of generalized information for everyone. So that being said, today we're talking about Gender Equality Month. I'm going to pass it over to Brooke if you want to introduce yourself and then just toss the baton onto the next speaker. Tell us a little bit about what you do, what your title is, what a typical day or week looks like for you. I'm sure that's a lot, but go for it.
There's no such thing as a typical day. But hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Brooke DeCipio. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently the Director of Survivor Support and Intimacy Education at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I've been in this role, it will be 15 years in August, so coming up on the 15th anniversary mark. I have my PhD in human sexuality. So most of our programming and approach to the work is coming from a inclusive and comprehensive sexuality model as a form of prevention, as well as support for survivors of gender-based violence. Like I said, there is no typical day. I feel like every morning when I come into the office, I'm like, here's what's on the slate today. And that is not what happens because we often end up in a crisis and response mode. But I typically it is meeting with students, so advising student feminist praxis on campus. I have a group of about 60 peer educators that I work with. And so working and coaching and advising them. University strategic leadership around policy and response for gender-based violence. Lots of research. I teach in our WGSS department, so in the classroom as well. So lots of different hats and things on the docket every day. So
Yeah.
Carmen is in a similar role over at Lafayette, so I will turn it over to Carmen to intro next.
Thanks, Brooke. Hi, everybody. Excuse me. My name is Carmen Brown. I use she, her pronouns. As Brooke mentioned, I am over at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. I serve as the Director of Student Advocacy and Prevention. So within that role, it's kind of a dual part role. I serve as a confidential advocate for individuals, students who have experienced or who know someone who has experienced sexual and dating violence and stalking. So really from that space, working with them to figure out what next steps are, if they're already involved in the Title IX process, helping them navigate what that process looks like, work very closely with our Director of Institutional Equity and Title IX within that regard. And then on the other side, I do a lot of prevention work with primarily from my office, but also two different student groups. So I oversee our peer anti-violence educators, and then another actual student organization who really carry the bulk of the prevention work, and I'm kind of here to support them. And so they obviously, students have a much broader reach than I do, and that's really how we get that inclusivity aspect through our prevention work, is reaching out to those various connections that students might have and just kind of really leaning on that to make sure that when we're offering prevention, we're thinking about how do these issues connect to the population we're talking to, what fits best for them. So last but not least, we'll go ahead, and I don't want to talk too much because I feel like I'll answer a question eventually in an
It's fine.
introduction. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Kay.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kay Jones. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am the health education coordinator at the Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center in Allentown. Similarly to Brooke, I kind of don't know what I'm going to walk into every day. Every day at a nonprofit kind of looks a little bit differently. But some of the main facets of my position are youth education, and outreach. So I go into primarily middle schools and high schools, and I do tobacco and vaping cessation work with them. But along with that comes the LGBTQ plus education and data sets around those topics. And then I also talk about advocacy with my students, how to advocate for themselves, for those around them, for their communities. Um, and also on top of that, I do other kinds of education. So primarily with middle schoolers, I teach, coping skills and peer pressure, anger management skills with them. And we kind of talk about how to slow down before we make impulsive decisions. On top of that, again, there's a lot going on at a nonprofit. I kind of do a whole bunch of little things all the time. But my community outreach portion is a huge part of what I do. That's how I met Panayiota in Turning Point. We go to a lot of the same community events together. So it's a lot of outreach and talking to our communities and doing education. Education is a huge part of what I do. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I know. It's so hard to like encompass everything in one little, elevator speech nutshell. But we're all essentially what it boils down to, right, in that prevention work, right? Trying to support survivors of dating abuse, sexual assault, everything that we can do to support those of our community that might be more marginalized or need that extra support. Um, I think because this is more of a college discussion, right? Number one, I just want to say that the age group of 18 to 35 is typically the most at risk for elements of abuse. And, especially in the college world, I imagine it can be, yeah, interesting trying to engage with campus programming and whatnot. So I guess my first question is like, what do you tend to see on campus as far as like patterns of who's engaging, what type of events tend to get the most traction? What do you tend to see the most of? Well, whoever
Okay.
feels comfortable. Go for it, Carmen.
I'll start. I think that so, and maybe this is how others experience this as well too. We tend to get a lot of the same students over and over who feel passionately about these topics already. So often, I know a struggle of mine is kind of extending out from that immediate group as to getting those other students into how do we actually engage a majority or get as close to a majority of the student population as we absolutely can.
Mhm.
Because the ones who are most passionate about it already get it. They understand it. They know what they're talking about. They know how to talk about these issues. They talk about them all the time because they're trained to. And so I really think often what we've been trying to do more often with some of our more successful programs is thinking about how those programs are a little bit more visible, so that you can engage someone who's just kind of like walking by. So whether that be tabling or, in the past we've done at a previous institution I was at, we did chalking, and we're bringing chalking to Lafayette this SAM. Our denim day tabling is always held outside, or if not outside, within a space like the student center. So really trying to get those like students who may not otherwise see a flyer and want to come to an event, but really getting them just as they're walking to lunch, walking to dinner, wherever it is, just kind of existing in a space that they typically exist in. And then that allows the students to be able to use their connections to be like, hey, come over here really quickly. I'm not going to ask a lot of you, but like, look, you can get a sticker, you can get a snack, whatever it is we're offering. And we're trying to, and I'm encouraging the students to lean a little bit more into those larger events too. Recognizing a lot of student groups ask for specific workshops and programming from us. And we'll go work with those groups to give them what they want. But when it comes to that broader population to extend outside of the ones who are already passionate and care, I think a lot of it for us has been like, how visible can we make this work to get students engaged?
Yeah, that's fair.
I think similarly, right? So you will have a group of students that is active, engaged, and passionate, right? And so how do we coach them on, their spheres of influence and making them into, right, agents of change, within their communities? But beyond that, we do a lot of work, focusing on affiliated student groups. So there's a lot of data and research, that one of the key factors on college campuses is the social learning theory and social norming aspect, of these types of behaviors. And so really working, with affiliated groups like our athletic teams, our fraternities and sororities, our student clubs and orgs, our student leader groups. Um, and then right, like developing a programmatic approach that meets the individual tailored needs of those groups. Um, and similar to, what Carmen shared, the most popular things are the large campus-wide events that are a mix of kind of social and education, right? So when we're feeding them dinner and giving them prizes, they are more likely to come, and then engage in conversation, and consciousness raising about these topics. But those tend to be the ones that are the most well attended, in terms of, this type of work.
Yeah. Anything? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, very similarly to Brooke and Carmen, I think giving them incentives has been my most impactful tool when speaking to specifically college age students. I think when I previously in the past I've gone to Cedar Crest College in Allentown and kind of done like a safe sex health education kind of presentation, and I ran out of seats in the room because we gave them sex toys and we had competitions, or adding some kind of interactive portion to the education is also something that I found really, really helps keep them engaged and keep them there till the end. Sometimes I find in programming they'll stay for the first half so they can get their prize and then they go. Um, but if usually I'll like give a couple prizes away in the beginning, in the middle, and then at the end we'll raffle off whatever's left, and that's kind of improved overall attendance and keeping cheeks in the seats, if you will. uh,
Go for
The
it.
one thing too that I think, right, like no one brought this up, but important, I think, to acknowledge the role that the online presence, right, of our work plays. Most of, you know, uh, this was not this way 15 years ago, but now, right? Like where most of them get their information from is, online or social media accounts. And so that has become an increasingly important form of engagement over the last couple years, is
Mhm.
making sure that you have robust, active social media presence, to engage, with this generation of students. So again, wasn't mentioned, and I just feel like that's an important, when we think about engagement, I think it's important to think about the online engagement as well.
Yeah, for sure. And just like in general, as you're talking about, right, that it seems like meeting that social and educational need at the same time, or, basic needs like food, right? Everybody loves food. Um, just is the best kind of way to engage. And I know both of you have like peer educator groups on campus, which is really great that there's that kind of bridge between, the adults in the room, not that the college students aren't adults, but the, staff member in the room and then the students and whatnot. Um, how I know that everyone kind of said that there tends to be sort of this core group that engages, and then, kind of trying to trickle out from that based on the spheres of influence that we have. What are you seeing as far as like gender equality programming, or what types of gender equality programming have you done on campus that either has been really effective or maybe bombed and you just, are working to improve? No pressure. Whoever feels comfortable.
So I think one of the things is thinking right, like the collaborative piece. um Oftentimes there are multiple offices or spaces on campus and in the community that are doing work towards gender equity. So we at Lehigh have a gender leadership and empowerment center. We have our pride center. We have our women, gender, and sexuality studies academic department. We work with community organizations like Turning Point, like Crime Victims Council, like Bradbury Sullivan Center, Clear Path Wellness, right? And so I think oftentimes the most successful programs are the ones where you are bringing together the folks that are doing the work in meaningful and intentional ways. The students who connect with our Pride Center are a different pocket of students than connect often with my off, right? And so I think that is one of the ways that you create really far-reaching, impactful programs, is bringing all the folks doing the work to the table, and those collaborative types of programs and events. This is not specifically a gender like equality one,
Mhm.
but we did a new event on campus this year. So One Condoms does a Project Condom event. It is a fashion show to raise awareness and education about safe sex. So typically we do a safe sex program ahead of spring break. And so, it was College of Health, Pride Center, Gender Leadership Empowerment, our Health Advancement Prevention Strategies Office, our Health and Wellness Center, Bradbury, right? So it was a hugely successful event because of all the different voices and perspectives that were in the room, which then trickled out to their population of students. So those are the type of events that I think end up being really successful.
Mhm. I
I
guess.
mean,
Go ahead.
second
If you
all
want,
of
yeah.
that to exactly
Sorry.
what Brooke said. I didn't know you're okay. I don't think I could say it better. I do think that collaboration and partnership is one of the most important things that anyone within one of these roles, these offices can really do. I always say I'm an office of one, and while a majority of this work might fall under my purview, it should not solely be on me because these are not issues that are only impacting, the students who are coming into contact with my office. And so it's really broader than that. It's a campus-wide initiative. And so similarly, partnering with those departments on campus,
Mhm.
both staff ones and academic ones. And then also ensuring that student groups who are connected in various different ways are brought into the fold as well too. And that usually comes from that campus connection or that department connection from a staff level, or even a faculty level sometimes. And those events, as Brooke said, are usually the most successful ones because you're just reaching a broader array of students, different students, and it's really kind of bringing all of them into the fold, no matter what their identity looks like.
Mhm.
Um, this is one thing that we're working on here, and I know this is a little kind of like tipping the gender inclusive on its head. But what we've found is a real issue in getting men or male students engaged in any type of programming that is not mandatory. And usually those populations we are only reaching is fraternity members and athletics. And we recognize that not every male student is a fraternity member or an athlete. So something that we're also working on too is thinking about how can we potentially bring men into the fold and what does prevention programming look like for them? Because it doesn't look the same that it does for kind of what we're offering to a larger student body or the broader student body. What do they want to see? What does that look like? Because recognizing, I think, unfortunate violence is one of those issues. Intimate partner violence, interpersonal violence is one of those issues that impacts females more often, female identifying individuals, LGBTQ plus individuals, and then men kind of get left behind. And recognizing that there are male survivors, and they might not feel that same support to come forward to even present at a prevention program to find out what their resources are. So I know that's been one initiative that we've kind of been working on and have gotten some support and funding to be able to run some focus groups, because that's a big space that we're currently missing even when we're looking at partnerships, because a lot of times people just see sexual violence prevention and they think women, LGBTQ folks, and don't necessarily think to include any male identifying groups within that, or groups who are primarily men within that.
And that's something that I want to ask too. I want to ask you, Kay, anyone, but specifically Kay, like I, I, I think there's absolutely a benefit to having different clubs that are focused on different identities and whatnot, because you want to have that safe space where, you can go with like-minded people and talk about the things that you're facing that you want to talk about. Just have fun with people that get it, right? But sometimes I wonder too, is having like specific LGBTQ club, like trans whatever club or whatnot, right? Male athletics, fraternity. Like sometimes I wonder if that in itself is almost a barrier that we silo different identities. I absolutely agree that, there has to be that collaborative conversation with each group, but I don't know, do you see that, Kay, in engaging with the different schools that you know, anyone who identifies as LGBTQ is kind of like an afterthought or pushed into a club of this is where your space is and this is like for everyone else. What are you seeing?
Honestly, I think that it's unintentionally happening. I think it's done with the intention and the purpose of saying like this is something specific to the X group of people that they need this resource but I agree that sometimes that could potentially become a siloing experience, particularly from the LGBTQIA plus lens, when you're talking about like it almost feels like all of the topics and presentations that are LGBTQ plus specific, and I'm only speaking to that because that's primarily the work that I do. It's usually about like all the bad or sad things that sometimes happen to our community, and that can be really heavy, and not a lot of students maybe want to engage with that, no matter how well intentioned it may be. And that could be partly I mean, I don't know. That could partially be a reason why maybe male students may not want to attend the sexual violence conversations or the conversations about intimate partner violence, because there is the stigma that, oh, well, it only happens to women because men are evil. And then they're taking that and they're kind of running with it and saying, well, I can't go to that space. It's not for me. And
Which
I
our
don't
men are not evil, for the record, just throwing
no,
that out
and
there,
I'm not
since we are
saying
a
that
group
at
of women
all.
here.
Just so we all know, I am not saying that, but I'm saying that could
Right.
sometimes be when I'm talking to students, that could sometimes be the response that they're feeling, or especially when you're talking about like the percentages of violence to men versus women, or vice versa. I do think that sometimes we see that unintentionally, and I I I don't know the best way to address that, because it's almost like a double-edged sword where you're trying to address the needs of a community while another community may feel left out or targeted or XYZ. But I think you both made really great points about including more than just one community or group on campuses, like having the LGBTQ plus club be involved, and then maybe athletics, and then trying to meet in the middle and create a space where everyone feels safe and welcome to kind of share their experiences and be themselves. And that may just be, I don't know the exact way to kind of do that, but I think it may just be the spaces are not always the what people assume to be the safest to share their feelings.
Mhm.
Does that
And
answer the question?
yeah, and I don't ask that just for all of you, but for anyone listening too. I don't ask that saying like, oh, you guys aren't doing a great job, because I know you're doing a great job. I know that you're very inclusive in what you do. I know that, I am of the belief that regardless of what I'm doing, there's always something better that I could be improving on, right? So I ask that more just along the lines of like, how can we, either challenge norms that maybe aren't as inclusive or talk about what barriers might we have unintentionally to help students feel safe in disclosing and accessing those supports. Do you see any other barriers or, I don't know, societal norms within the college dynamic that maybe um, have impacted how students have engaged?
I mean, I think honestly, I think one of the biggest barriers is the right like echo chambers of social media. I feel like, my students talk a lot about like particularly in the manosphere, right? And some of these folks that they follow or even the AI bots, right, that like fill their feed. And this kind of, I think, connects to the last question that you asked, because I do think, right, like we very much are living in a socio-political environment of identity politics. And if those groups don't exist, then our students are finding spaces where they do, right? And then they are, right, like in an echo chamber of thought. And so creating these opportunities for them to explore what that engagement looks like and what attitudes, values, and beliefs they're walking away with from that interaction, I think is becoming increasingly important. Um, you know, what you they can scroll for hours, right? And hearing the same messaging and what is the impact that is having on behavior and interpersonal relationships. And so I think that is a huge barrier that we are coming up against. In addition to the fact that I think technology is evolving so rapidly, and we don't have, frankly, the policies or the laws or the prevention frameworks to keep up with it. And so, right, like it sometimes feels like we're constantly playing catch up. So
Yeah. No, I agree that the digital aspect of it, especially at the college age, right, is one of those dynamics that you're right. Like if they don't have that space, they're going to find it wherever it makes the most sense for them. And I've noticed, especially over the last, I don't know, 5, 10-ish years, that there has been this shift, especially online, of if you don't agree with me, like, don't follow me, don't, delete me or just leave. And there's almost like no spaces anymore, or fewer and fewer spaces where people are willing to have open and honest dialogue with opposing viewpoints. And I don't know, just a random thought to throw to the mix. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, but I could see how that could be another possible barrier too, of just where are we finding spaces to meet in the middle and be open and honest with one another about how we're both helping different groups and different identities, but also maybe hindering or making it harder for them to feel connected and safe. Um, Talk to me about if I'm a college student on campus and I experience, you know, um, some level of violence, dating violence, sexual violence, whatever the case is. Walk me through the process. Like what would I do? Where do I go? What services are available to me? And we could talk kind of on a general spectrum, but if you want to highlight any specific campus things, feel free.
I mean,
Go for
right, this is
it.
the bread and butter of our work. I mean, right, the first piece is always the safety risk assessment. So is student in current imminent threat situation? Is there fear or existing harm kind of going on? So always kind of starting with that safety assessment. I will typically do a basic needs assessment from there, right? So do we have housing? Do we have food? Do we have, ability to go to class? Do we have support? Like, right? So a basic kind of needs assessment of where we're at and what they need. Making sure basic needs are met before we move forward. And then from there are so many different options available. I think sometimes it can feel overwhelming to students. So sometimes having a friend or a support person to kind of be there to take notes or things like that to help navigate, because there are so many different options, particularly on college campuses. Um, but oftentimes we'll talk first about confidential resources. So confidential counseling, a lot of our community partners, so Turning Point Crime Victims Council, right, offer confidential options as well. From there, we're talking about reporting options if that's something they are interested in. University kind of policy violation reporting, criminal reporting through police. And then from there, right, we're talking about sustainable support resources. So what types of things do they need to feel supported to help navigate this? I think oftentimes we will right, like treat survivors as in crisis mode. And so we don't often pause to talk with them about what their goals are, right? And so I think that is an important piece. So if a student is coming in and right, like the goal is like I just want to get through the semester, that's a different conversation than I'm feeling empowered to report or to do something about it. And so I think remembering that survivors have agency and how do we empower them to figure out their goals and what's most helpful for them. But that's what a typical kind of process or options would look like. Again, happy to chat through specifics if folks want to know more about any of the options. And Carmen, you all might have similar or different kind of process as well. So.
Yeah, so I think very similar in a lot of realms. I think, right, when we get especially into the options of how a survivor can move forward and the various different options that are available to them through reporting, support, resources, are very much along the same lines. I think one big difference I know that we have is the advocate program. So I know at Lehigh, they have a specific advocate program with trained advocates who students can reach out to. There's a number for them to call. Lafayette doesn't have that. So essentially students have, when they've experienced something, kind of three options at first. The first is to report it to someone who would be a mandated reporter, whether that be an RA, a faculty member. We get a lot of reports from faculty members, whether that be going directly to Title IX, public safety. So someone who has that obligation to then report it further. They have an opportunity to go to a confidential resource. So myself, one of our college chaplains, the counseling center, the health center. And then the third option, unfortunately, to not take action. But at the end of the day, recognizing that they have agency to choose and follow along any one of those three paths. And at any point in time, really kind of switch along those paths as to who they're engaging with. From my perspective as a confidential advocate, usually I am not coming into contact with a student who is in crisis. Typically, if they're displaying any signs of crisis, that's usually been picked up by someone and ends up on our student support and intervention team prior to them even getting to me. So usually in the space that I'm working with students, they're typically coming in and they've sat with it for a little bit and they've decided, now I want to go talk to someone. Or a friend told me I had someone that I could talk to who won't report anything. And it's not the counseling center, it's not any of these spaces, someone specifically who is trained to know these issues and these processes. And so a lot of kind of just sitting with the student, and to echo what Brooke said, allowing them to make that decision for themselves as to what their next steps look like. Whether they're already in the Title IX, realm, and, our Title IX coordinator is aware of them or has a report for them, or whether or not they're not, just allowing them and reminding them that they have that opportunity to move forward with whatever their next step looks like. And I think sometimes that can get lost in higher ed sometimes because we want to make sure that our students are safe and that their well-being is paramount to the issues they are experiencing and that they can, function as students. And we have a duty to protect them in a way, but that duty to protect them shouldn't come at the cost of them not being able to make their own decisions anymore. And I always come back to, especially when I'm advocating with students or for students, really thinking about coming back to like they are the experts of their own experience. I am not someone, I can give them as much information as possible, but they are going to be the ones that know what's best for them because that's their first person experience. That's not for me to make a decision.
Mhm. And I think that like coming back to that empowerment, that, voice and choice element of things, right, really helps solidify that inclusivity aspect. Kay, in your role as like health prevention educator and whatnot, and with all of the work that you guys have done with the PA LGBTQ health needs, survey and everything, have you seen or heard from your community clients things along the lines of like, hey, I felt super supported when this happened, or hey, I loved that this space had this for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So a huge part of the benefit of being a community center is that we put community kind of at the center of every decision that we make. Everything that we do is all centered around what does our community want. And a lot of times that just means being in a safe and affirming space for people to go during the day, and just being around people who they feel safe. And um, since unfortunately the closure of Project Silk in Allentown, we've had a really high uptick of youth coming in to use our space, like particularly like high school age kiddos coming in and just hanging out, and we have food for them. But particularly our community groups. We have a community group for different identities throughout the LGBTQIA community. And a lot of those are hybrid. So I may not be an on-campus specific resource, but if you have someone, coming to you saying like, I feel really lonely, I feel isolated, I feel like no one understands me or things that I'm experiencing, a lot of our community groups are there and they're hybrid. So if the student can't make it all the way to Allentown, like if they're at Lafayette in Easton or in Bethlehem in at Lehigh, and transport is an issue, we do have community groups that are hybrid, so they can still participate and kind of take a step back from all the crazy things that may be going on campus, or they just need a space to be themselves. I do encourage, people to drop in and stop by and say hi. We also do just community events. Like some of our community members will meet up at Brew Daddies in Allentown, and it's just they'll just go and get some food together and chit chat, and that's been really, really popular. A lot of times it's not necessarily the educational perspective programs, but it's just fun, easygoing programs that make people feel like, wow, this is such a good experience to be with other people and just take a deep breath. Um, so
Especially post COVID, I feel like that's been a
yes,
thing. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. That and you're right. I think there's that beauty in like being able to create safe spaces also means being able to create spaces where people can have fun and enjoy each other's company and not always just be like heavy and talking about, abuse and violence and whatnot, which again, I know that you guys are all doing all of the things and that's, I appreciate all of you. And that's not that you guys are the only two schools that are doing that. I know that there are other schools that are doing plenty of work in this realm. Um, but yeah, I think just having those spaces where we're celebrating that inclusive joy, and reminding students, staff, faculty, whoever, community clients that, healthy relationships also include fun and feeling safe enough to have fun. And um, yeah, so I think that's something that's often forgotten when we're looking at red or green flags for things. Um, what would you say in your vast experience of things, what is one concrete step that you would recommend other campuses take at this point to help advance both gender equality, but just equality in general to make survivors of all identities feel safe enough to report and find resources? Rock, paper, scissors.
I mean, I
Go.
think one of the most important thing is ensuring that we are doing things like campus climate surveys, but right, so that we have a pulse on what are the needs of the community? I mean, it's constantly changing and evolving. And I think oftentimes when, right, like we do this work for a long time, we get stuck in a like, oh, like we've always done this program or we've always done it this way. And so I think the campus climate surveys and right, like having the data to support what we're doing and why we're doing it. There are huge pockets of students who will never interact with our office. And so are we providing opportunities for them to provide feedback or to hear from them in a way that doesn't involve them, kind of engaging with the work? And so I think that's a good place to start, right? Is do you know the community you're working with? Do you know the needs of community? Like, are there gaps or hidden needs that you're not aware of? So kind of that data collection piece, I think, is an important starting point. Or even if you have a robust program and you've been doing this for a while, right? Like, is it still working, right? Or do you need to adjust or shift? So really that kind of that data loop, I think is a great first step.
Anyone else?
I think connected to that too is that that Brooke mentioned at the end was around like not getting stuck in those this has always worked, so we'll just continue to do it, or well, we've always had this partnership, so we'll always going to continue to do XYZ. And I think a lot of it is thinking about, what is best serving the student population at that point in time. So some partnerships that I know existed for, especially within our student organizations, I had some conversations with students who are like, well, we always used to partner with these people and we always used to do XYZ with them, and this is what it was. And they're like, but they don't seem to want to partner anymore. And encouraging them to think about, okay, so maybe programming isn't just serving in the right way. Maybe that's not a population that necessarily feels connected in this way, and encouraging them to think about what are new ways we could potentially connect with them and collaborate with them. But then also there's this whole other population over here. Just because you have partnered with someone doesn't mean that they're the only people that you can partner with moving forward. And I think that continual, we've talked a lot about partnership and collaboration, but I think that continual exploring of like, who can we partner with? Who can bring a new twist and turn to this? Who can bring a new perspective to it, a new population to it that otherwise wouldn't engage with these issues and with this content? And I think that's something that also keeps programming fresh, especially in a world that's changing so quickly with the rise of technology and AI and everything else, and thinking about, what are new departments that I might not have otherwise connected with that might be able to support me around how students use AI, about how students use technology, right? And so I think it's both that formal of, like climate surveys and that data gathering, and that informal too of thinking about just kind of who is missing from the table, who could really help us with the issues that are most present right now.
Okay. Yeah. Any additional concrete steps to take?
I mean, I don't think I could have said it any better. I think just staying, I mean, again, being not directly on campus um, resource, but I think a lot of it is just keeping up with the times, keeping things fresh. Again, I think Carmen really drove home the point of like everything is changing constantly every single day. Things that worked 3 years ago are not even applicable to things that are going on right now. So it's, I think it's a matter of staying fresh, really asking students directly, like, what do you want to see? What are we missing? Is there something you think like, and that could also encourage their participation, say like, hey, you have an idea, let's make this work. Let's collaborate together. Let's do this. I think you're both doing a wonderful job. And I think it's important that you recognize that you have to collaborate and stay with the times to keep students engaged and participating.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, forget 3 years ago it worked, sometimes even like 3 months ago, and then it changes entirely. So, I know sometimes that on campus resources or support, like it might be very strong in certain teams, certain departments, certain whatever, but maybe the, full campus support or engagement isn't necessarily there, or maybe resource access is limited. For any campuses that might be paying attention that their resources might be limited, funding might be limited, but their commitment is strong and they want to continue to improve that element. I don't know. Do you have any advice on how to either build up those support systems within the campus or resources that you would recommend they look into other
I
than,
think
campus, yeah, surveys and community partners, et cetera. Sorry.
um I think one thing that unfortunately the social political world that we currently live in has really made it difficult to do is to really get campus administrators to recognize the importance of not just positions such as Brooke or mine or community partnerships, with Bradbury, Sullivan, and college campuses, but that it really is a campus-wide effort. And it is a campus-wide support system because they're not always going to come to myself or Brooke or one of the advocates or go to Bradbury Sullivan or another space, right? They're seeing their faculty members a lot. They're seeing all of these spaces, all these other people more often than they're probably engaging with us. And I think unfortunately the political world we live in today has made these issues seem less important. And then just the state of higher education and some of the struggles that a lot of colleges and universities are experiencing has made it even more difficult. But um, I think the one thing I would say, and maybe it's not a solid concrete step, but it's kind of just like don't don't stop telling the don't stop sharing the message. Like don't stop just because people don't seem to be listening. I think that this message constantly needs to be shared of how important it is, of just like, hey, I need to be in this space, I need to be here, or we need to be educating here, or we need to be doing this with this, and this is why, because we've heard of this instance where a faculty member is doing XYZ, or they're not respecting, what a student is requesting. And I think it can feel tiring in this work and it can feel exhausting. But I really think that just due to circumstances, this has felt less important for college campuses. But I think that's what makes it even more important for us to speak up about the importance of, if it's not going to come from one office, it needs to come from the entire campus. You need to find a space for it. And these are the ways to do so, whatever that might look like, dependent upon the particular campus. But I think it's more important now than ever to really kind of just like scream it out as much as you possibly can. Like I said, I know that's not terribly concrete, but I think that's been sitting with me a lot recently, is just like, I'll say the same sentence over and over again until you finally listen to me. I'm exhausted and I'm tired, and I'm going to wear you down.
Mhm. I mean, that's concrete enough, right? Just go on campus and start yelling, "Hey, I'm here. Hey, hi." Go ahead, sorry.
I mean, I think too is being really strategic about, right, like what do people care about, right? Because that's your
Mhm.
in, right? So athletics departments care about player eligibility, right? And so what are the NCAA training requirements for player eligibility, right? Because that's your in.
Yep.
The university marketing people care about the brand, right? So that's your it, right? So like what is it that the folks
Mhm.
that you're working with care about? Because that is how um, I think a lot of times like we can be really siloed in our fields and jargony and stuff, but finding things that translate beyond the prevention field to really speak to the needs of other departments. I think is a really important piece. The other thing too, I think, is to leverage the partnerships. All of us on the call, I think, are really good at that, right? So, like, we have a group in the Lehigh Valley that meets regularly, right? And if Carmen is doing a really cool program or event, right, like, how can I support that? Can I send my students? Right? Because then that is a lift off of me, right? I'm not planning the program, I'm not funding the program. Carmen is already doing it. How can we get more people in the room for her? Or right, like, if Turning Point is doing an event, right? Like, can we could that be part of our October domestic violence programming? And can we get people there? So within your community, right, like are you creating those partnerships that you then are utilizing rather than every time there's an ask trying to start from scratch? Even just like logistical things like it's a lot cheaper if you're bringing a speaker to the area and you're sharing the cost of travel and hotel, right, with a university down the road than if you're doing that yourself. So little things like that can really, I think, take the burden off of overextended and under-resourced offices like ours. So those are things, I think to think about as well with this.
If you could wave a magic wand and see what gender equity would look like, or have successful gender equity on campus or within your community in the next year, 5 years, whatever, what would it look like for you?
I have an initial reaction, but it's not appropriate obviously, on a recorded webinar, so I will refrain from that.
Oh.
Um, I mean, honestly, like I think the biggest issue is that, right, like this really is a socio-political issue.
Mhm.
And right, like just in the past year, decades of work has been undone, right? And so until we are, right, the magic wand wave is that we are living in a society that is
Mm.
critically conscious of these issues and is not doing further harm, right?
Mhm.
Because I think that is I mean, I will not speak for Carmen and Kay, but for me, every day it feels like I cannot do proactive preventative work because we are in a crisis of reaction right now. And
Mhm.
so it is, constantly trying to stop the eroding of rights and equity rather than working towards, right, like social justice or equity work. It is we're just hanging on for dear life right now. And so that feels right, like until we kind of stopgap that the progressive equity work doesn't feel possible right now.
Mhm. I see a lot of heads nodding, so I guess there's a lot of agreement there. Um,
I mean, I couldn't agree more with what Brooke said. I think in the line of work that I do specifically working with the LGBTQ plus community, gender equity has been a major, major, major topic, especially when we're talking about our transgender and non-binary family members. So I think in a perfect world, everyone would just be respectful and there would not be this reactionary, this negative reaction to this idea of equity. It is not everyone benefits from equity. Everyone gets exactly what they need in order to succeed. And I think that that messaging is kind of jumbled up and confused at the moment. And
mhm.
so the words, I mean, just with the whole DEI conversation, and having those words kind of needed to be nixed from some of our programming or the programming of colleges. I don't know specifically if Lehigh and Lafayette have been impacted by this, but I'm only speaking from Cedar Crest experience because we've done some programming with them and they've had to change the name of some of their buildings to kind of be in accordance with things that are going on right now. But in a perfect world, everyone would have the exact amount of, I think just basic respect would be a good place to maybe start. Um,
Yeah. I think finding those, like, where are we all in agreement, and how can we pivot from that? Like, we all want safety. We all want a space where we can be respected, supported, heard, and just where we can thrive, right? A community that we can thrive in. And I think that I would hope and think that that's something that we all want for ourselves, but also for the people in our community, regardless of who they are, what they identify as, whatever. So yeah, maybe starting from that just baseline of where do we go from here to help everyone thrive. Um, Carmen, any last thoughts? No? Okay.
I don't think so. No, I think it's all
Mhm.
been said.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And there's always a lot to talk about on this topic. And it's like like you said, Brooke, it's not, I think it's something that has become more and more important as time has gone on. Um so today's the last day of the month. So last day of Gender Equality Month, we are pivoting into Sexual Assault, Sexual Abuse Awareness Month. Um I will share that, over 1 in 3 women, over 1 in 4 men, over 1 in 3 LGBTQ individuals, over 1 in 2 who are transgender specifically experience physical violence from an intimate partner. So if you ever need us, our services are offered at no cost. We have our 24/7 helpline, which I will put in the chat. But do you guys want to highlight any upcoming events, resources, anything about your office or work that you do that might be beneficial for the community to know about?
It's 25 years of Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So that is a pretty big deal. For those that aren't familiar, kind of in practice since kind of advocacy work started in the late 1800s. April was always designated kind of as a month for sexual assault awareness and prevention work. And in 2000 into 2001, it was officially codified into Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So celebrating the 25th anniversary this year. I think some things that are we have a ton of stuff happening on our campus, but not really relevant to everyone on the call today. But Denim Day is the last Wednesday of April, so the 29th. So that is an international kind of using fashion to raise awareness about gender-based violence. So wear your denim on April 29th. A lot of our community partners will have events going on that are open to everyone. So Clear Path Wellness, Lehigh Valley does what they call Break the Silence event every April. It's essentially a community take back the night that creates a safe space for survivors to share their experiences in community with one another. So they do that every April. Crime Victims Council is doing clothesline project and like a survivor social, I want to say on the 9th, so next week. And then we'll have their vigil happening on April 20, whatever that Wednesday is, the 23rd maybe. And so, 22nd, I think, is the Wednesday. But I'm sure, kind of wherever you are in the community, there are events and things to get involved with. Oftentimes, too, if folks don't feel safe, there's online venues and things to engage with as well. So kind of ways you can do activism online. So.
Anyone else? Anything to highlight, share? Well, I'm going to just remind everyone. So we have Lehigh University with Brooke, Carmen Brown with Lafayette, and Kay with Bradbury Sullivan. If you ever need any of us, just feel free to reach out, check out our websites. I put the Turning Point helpline in the chat. Again, you should get a feedback survey that pops up when you close this window, but we are super grateful for all of you being here. Thank you guys for being here and being the minds that you allowed me to pick at for today to talk about this topic, because I know it's not always an easy thing to, focus on just the topic itself, but also the intersection of gender equity in supporting survivors. So yeah, I super appreciate your time and your all the work that you do, because it's important. And I think, like we said, just meeting people where they are, becoming those agents of change, that even if we make that impact with one person and make that one person feel safe, that often has that trickle effect and helps kind of build those avenues from there. So thank you for all you do.
Thanks to Turning Point for hosting and putting this together. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Stay safe.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you.